The following is a production of Fenix Media. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the company or its advertisers and may contain language that's unsuitable for younger listeners.
Everybody to You Bet Your Arse, the podcast where we cover the week's biggest sports bets. You know, we're broadcasting live from the National Automobile Museum in downtown Reno. If you want tickets or information for this wonderful location, just head over to automuseum.org. Now, I'm Kristian Fenix. Along with me is the Hubie Brown to my Mike Tirico, the G-Man. How you doing, G-Man?
Doing good, man. Doing good. It's been a minute.
It's been a couple weeks. You know, You were in Costa Rica. We did do a show from while you were on your balcony with your shades on. It was all nice, and
it was nice.
Then I
miss it.
Yeah. Then you spent a week in Vegas, and then came back, and so we took a couple weeks off, but we are back now, and ready to talk. Some Final Four action in NCAA Basketball, NBA. Get back onto our sports betting for dummies. See how we're doing on the hockey side of things. And then, we're going to start out the show with a little bit of football news. But before we get there, want to remind everybody that we've got a couple disclaimers. This show is for entertainment purposes only, which basically means that, the information we give you, we ask you to bet responsibly. Don't bet more than you are willing to lose. It's why we do the $2 tally each week because, for most people, $2 is an attainable goal to go out, have some fun with, cost of a movie, cost of going out and going bowling. Actually, bowling's pretty expensive these days. But it's one of those things where you can have the sports betting fun without going too far overboard.
Yeah. Just again, do if you can afford it. Again, it's just another form of entertainment. And the $2, that's pretty affordable to do. You still have some fun. You get the angst of the wins and the losses, otherwise known as the juice. And speaking of Vegas, same type of thing, went in with a budget. And after all was said and done, I pretty much paid for all of my food and beverage, and actually had a tutoring session at the craps table, for my buddies that never played it. It cost me $140, but that was like house money. You know what I mean? So, we're always looking for a way to give back to the people.
Exactly, and a trip to Vegas can be very expensive. So, if you walked out of there pretty much break even, what more could you ask for? Yeah,
I mean, again, over 5 days, that we're there actively betting on all the games. I guess not all the games.
Most
it's like
of them.
48 games, that you have in total. And
it's hard to keep track when there's 5 games going on at the same time.
I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like 14. I think it was like 14-6 or something like that on the publicly stated games over the course of the tournament up to this point. Which brings me back to a pretty good number, 45 and 35, combined with NCAA and the NBA. It's a tough business, this basketball stuff. I tell you what, I can't tell you how many times, especially on the in-play, that, man, I did pretty well, but there was a couple moments where it really would have gotten me over the hump. Mm-hmm. And, but it just didn't happen by, interestingly enough, a lot of times like a half a point.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
That is, because that's the fun of the in-play, is being able to, that's the unknown factor, because you can, again, logically, but if, sometimes just the way that the games specifically end in basketball, a three-pointer that does or doesn't go in, even a free throw, and that's really what it comes down to. When you lose by a half a point in basketball, you lost by a free throw, one way or the other.
Yeah. And actually, you bring up a good point. Our other disclaimer is about in-play. In-play is great because the information that we give you guys is up to date midday on Thursdays most of the time.
Right.
And a lot of times what we're talking about are games that are taking place either later in the evening, possibly on a Friday, or when we're in football season, all the way up to a Sunday. So in-play is great to make changes on the fly. You can do it by the quarter, by the half, whatever it may be. Right. But, that way what we say isn't gospel. If somebody gets hurt before the game, if conditions change, any of those things tend to happen, and they do happen, which makes in-play just a great resource to have.
Yeah, and it's truly a trending thing over the last few years, for sure. You don't have to go down to the casino as long as you're in a state that is legalized, gambling is allowed. These apps, allow you to basically do it from the comfort of your own home.
Yeah.
You don't have to ask for, have to wait for a server to come by and get you your beer, whatever necessarily. There are some things that are not, of course, there when you don't go out, and the crowd, the back and forth,
the energy,
the energy is missing. So that's, still a reason to go there. But outside of that, if you kind of want to stay, to yourself and especially whether you're there or not in a casino, or whether you're doing it from a sports bar or from the comfort of your own home, just being able to have that flexibility of making a bet during the course of the game instead of having to be there before halftime. It's awesome.
Exactly.
It's a lot of fun.
And they do it the right way. It's not like, DraftKings or FanDuel, where pretty much as long as you have a credit card, and they've got a few checks and balances to make sure you're of legal betting age. But with the William Hill and most of these sportsbook apps, you have to make your deposit there in person, have to prove you are who you are in making those deposits. And then you can go home and, obviously have fun, betting on the game, doing the in-play, whatever it may be. But, there is a certain amount of responsibility that these casinos take to make sure that it's fair for everybody.
Yeah, and they have pretty good controls that you can set up to control yourself. You can only deposit so much money in any given time. You can set up betting limits, in a 24-hour period and all these different things. So
the other thing you can do is you can do sort of free play where, you make imaginary bets and try your hand in it, see if you do well. And then, always put real money, down the road if you want to bet later.
Yeah. So. And then, at the end of the game, win or lose, you have your imaginary happiness or sadness.
Right. The sadness. I would have won so much money. Yeah. So anyway, those are the disclaimers. Now, before we get into the actual sports bets, want to talk a little bit about the NFL. Obviously, the NFL for G-Man and I are our bread and butter. We follow it all the way throughout, the off season. We're getting ready to come to the draft here very shortly, but there's been a couple big things in the NFL news here recently. One that G-Man just brought to my attention. I haven't been on top of things as much as I should have been, but tell me about Jerry Jones. What happened with that?
Well, apparently, as I understand it, let's see, what's the latest thing here? Oh, it looks like they took it off of the main feed on ESPN. So
this is yesterday's news.
Well, from what I understand so far, from what's been alleged, and they're not just alleged, there are some things that are a fact. One is that in the 90s, Jerry Jones signed. Actually, this lady, I can't remember her name, but the mother of this female signed an agreement, an NDA, not to disclose that Jerry Jones was the father of this child, and it cost him like $300,000 or something like that, back in the day,
back before 23andMe and Ancestry.com.
So this poor kid, you know what I mean? We don't have any control, who were born into the world with whatever situation, but the situation is that eventually it's just like, who's my daddy? And, and then of course you can imagine the mom saying, here's the situation, here's who your dad is, but we can't say anything about it or we're going to get in trouble. I will go to jail.
Right.
And so that type of pressure, for a child growing up, I can't imagine, I actually came from a background where I had a moment like that because my mom and dad split when I was young. My biological dad and mom split when I was very young. And so by the time I had memories, I already had a replacement, a stepdad, who was awesome. And that's who my dad is. And so about 5 years old, though, I can remember, saying, hey, I got something to talk to you about, my mom. You're a little special, because you don't have just one dad. You get to grow up with two dads. And I'm like, what? And she's just like, yeah, and your other dad that you're going to be meeting this weekend, he sent a gift for you, and it was a brand new baseball glove. And so he's like a good entrance.
Right. It's not Jerry Jones money, but it's, a baseball glove. Nice.
So I can relate to this girl, who again had to shun, in a way, be shunned. She felt being shunned.
Well, I'm curious if there's a legal gray area, because, the mom signed the agreement. Obviously, it had to be honored while she was still a minor, but once she becomes an adult, I don't think she has to abide by the mom's agreement.
Well, the interesting thing is that from again, what I read on it recently is that Jerry Jones is trying to get this whole thing dismissed,
of course,
as a money grabbing, type of thing. But the interesting thing is the other side has expressed that we don't want any money. We just want you to acknowledge that you're my dad.
Right.
That's it.
Right. We're going to wait till you die and then come from the money.
Maybe how the attorneys advise, so this is a long game.
Interesting.
But I think on the side of decency, I don't know, I don't know him personally, but it's a matter of public record that I'm not a fan of Jerry Jones. What? And I think this is just another indication of why, because if something like this were to happen to me personally, I would like to think, that I would, he doesn't want to take a paternity test. He doesn't dispute the validity of what the documents that he signed already, but he doesn't acknowledge it.
Interesting.
And it's kind of like come to that where she just kind of wants to be free, I think, from it,
right?
And be able to say, yeah, that's who my dad is.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah. So that's the Jerry Jones saga.
Yeah, it's funny the things that you hear about. Obviously, I can't imagine any of that would affect the Cowboys game, the Cowboys' ability for the sports betting. But you always get a nice little peek into the lives of these public figures, and in the court of popular opinion, he's not looking so good right now.
Yeah, and this is no disrespect to Sean O'Hara or any of the Cowboy fans. I'm not like a Stephen A. Smith against Cowboy fans.
You're not angry enough to be a Stephen A. Smith.
Mine specifically goes to the owner. I just don't like the way that he rolls. And this is just another example. So, little public shaming on the, You Bet Your Arse show.
Interesting. All right. Moving on to some other NFL headlines. And again, in the last couple of weeks, I've been so busy. I only have the headlines, so maybe you can fill me in on some of the details.
What do we got?
Next one is Deshaun Watson being picked up by the Cleveland Browns. Now, I don't know any of the information around it, if he is the planned starter, what's happening with Baker Mayfield, if Watson's just a backup, how much he's being paid. But it is going to throw a little controversy there in the locker room for sure.
Yeah, I tell you what, from the outside looking in, not being aligned or allegiant to the Browns at all. Outside of, everybody loves an underdog. When the Chicago Cubs won the World Series, I was rooting for them. And I'd rather have Deshaun Watson than Baker Mayfield any day of the week.
Oh, me too.
Any day.
Yeah. This off-field stuff, Deshaun Watson is a better all-around athlete.
It's real easy to let a year go by where the guy doesn't play, but this is a bad man. The last time that he played, he was in the AFC Championship game.
Right.
Isn't that right?
He was. It was against the Titans when they lost.
Yeah, exactly. And so, it is what it is. Again, I think it's, again, a little bit disingenuous when, say, an owner of a football team called the Patriots can get caught getting happy endings at a massage parlor in Florida. And, one of the players is doing the same thing. And as long as I mean, I guess I don't know the jurisdiction, the statutes, and it was probably something that was illegal and under the table, but things like that happen all the time. Speaking of Jerry Jones again, there was a thing called the White House that the Cowboys had back in the day, and he found out about it and he turned his eye to, and there's all kinds of illegal activity going on out there. Yeah. So it happens whether it's the NFL, whether it's the NBA, whether it's a dude that works for IBM.
Right.
Is IBM still in business?
They are. They are. Business solutions. Exactly. This is compared to some of the things that the NFL has turned their eye on. Not saying that they're going to. It looks like he probably will be. He's going to be probably suspended, for maybe 4 to 6 weeks, I think, if they come down on him with their conduct policy. But getting to the football side of things, Watson versus Baker, I think Baker overplayed his hand, Weeks, just the way that he's behaved again. I'm not a Baker Mayfield fan either. Well, it doesn't help that, he was supposed to be the superstar. Every other commercial has him in it. Mm-hmm. And he's not playing nearly up to the level that would warrant that sort of stardom.
I think it started like that because I felt the same way when he first came in the league, just like if I was in the locker room. I guess I can't ever get outside of mentally. I can't get outside of a football locker room when I look and think about things like this, even though I never made it to the NFL, obviously, but same type of thing. These commercials came out and I'm like, that's a little bit early, now you just, because you're first, just Johnny Manziel come to mind, Tim Couch, Marcus Mariota.
I was going to say none of that. Mark Sanchez.
There's so many times, where the first round pick just they just prove it's a different league, right? Yeah. And so I think that he came out just a little bit where the guys in the locker room, as I imagined, it's come to reality where they look back and, Marcus Spears, on ESPN will be talking about how, hey, this is the way that it was. And then, you come out and really, you can't ball out, you know what I mean? Yeah. You make it to the playoffs, when you have everything around you that you need to support an average quarterback, not for a great quarterback to take you to the next level, Yeah. And so I like the criticism.
It'll be interesting for sure, and obviously gives the pundits something to talk about for a while.
Yeah.
And then the last NFL headline, something came out yesterday, is Tampa Bay Buccaneers coach Bruce Arians is retiring.
Yeah.
I read briefly who the interim head coach is. Is it their offensive coordinator? Is it Byron Leftwich or?
No. Todd Bowles. Yeah.
Yes,
Todd Bowles.
You.
Yeah.
And I don't know, if Bruce is retiring for medical reasons. He's had
he's up there,
some issues, or obviously you've kind of got the Brady foot in the door, foot out the door sort of thing. But regardless, we won't see Bruce Arians turning red on the field next season.
Yeah, I think that I don't know, could be a speculation, 100% speculation, but I could think that at this time. I mean, he's won a Super Bowl as an assistant coach. If not, was it 2? 1?
I think just 1.
1, yeah, as an assistant coach with the Steelers. He got 1 as a head coach, so that's 2. And he got to work with Tom Brady, and I think there's almost a part to, like, even though he was the head coach, there was 2 head coaches and Brady was one of them.
Right.
And so asking whether he could kind of get a cushy desk job and still have a kind of a hand in the way that things are handled around there. And at the same time, man, super 100% happy, for Todd, because I think that he's a great coach. And of course he was coach of the Jets. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows what happens when you go to the Jets.
Right.
Right. So no, that's a surprise. So I'm glad that he's getting his second chance, and I'm excited to see what he does with it. And I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. I think if things go well, Bulls will become their permanent head coach. Arians maybe take a year off. I think he'd be a great, maybe halftime commentator, something along those lines. Don't know if you watched the, what's the HBO show?
Hard Knocks.
Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
When he was the Texans head coach.
Yeah.
And he's got a great personality. I think he'd do well in it.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. To see what I like. I like Arians. It's kind of a no nonsense thing. Now, of course, him and Antonio Brown's going to be tied forever.
Right.
Linked. They're linked.
Well, it's you take the good and you take the bad.
Yeah, and then hey, don't forget the draft's coming up. So that'll be something that we'll be talking about here in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, that'll be fun to watch. Well, let's move on to the sports betting side of things. But before we get there, I want to remind everybody that we do have sponsorship opportunities available. If you are a business or a individual who wants to sponsor the show, has a great reach. Obviously sports fans, betting fans, men and women alike. We strongly encourage you to sponsor the show. Help us bring you guys great new content each week, and maybe even buy us a burger from time to time. And so if you do want information on sponsoring, all you have to do is email me at Kristian, that's Kristian at phoenixmedia.us. All right, let's get into it. We are down to the Final Four in NCAA men's basketball. Before we get into the individual picks, I want to touch briefly on the pool, the 64-team pool that we put out 24 hours before it started.
Yeah,
we had a few people who signed up. Obviously, next time we'll do it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I was rushed on that for sure. I had just gotten in the night before. I think I filled my bracket out maybe 3 hours before tip-off, if that, maybe 2 hours,
But for us, it was sort of a good proof of concept to see how it all works. Ended up using the Yahoo Fantasy Tournament Picker app, which works really well. And you know what? I ended up on top, even though we're all the way down to the Final Four, all the way to the point that I actually picked Villanova versus Kansas in this next round. And so I've got Villanova going to the national championship, but I did want to pat myself on the back a little bit there.
Hey, what can I say? What can I say? I was like, hindsight, of course, I was like foolish. I drank the Kool-Aid with Gonzaga, and I wanted to pick Duke, but they were playing so badly. I anticipated that they would be eliminated somewhere along the way, yep. and of course indicated by my bet last week, with them, which I had Duke. I can't remember. Let's look real quick here.
While you're doing that, so the way I had set up my bracket, I had Gonzaga versus Villanova, with Gonzaga winning in the Final Four over Duke, but obviously
you had Gonzaga too.
I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I lost that side of the round, but
it was crazy. I mean, as the tournament is, you got St. Peter's, and I'm not the only one that was doing this, but at the beginning of the tournament, I was just like, where is St. Peter's from? Where's St. Peter's? And now I know that they're somewhere in Jersey.
Okay.
Is that how you say that city? Jersey. And they just made history, man. The first number 15 to make it to the Elite Eight.
They were the Cinderella story of this bracket. Obviously, they've only gotten so far, but
well, and I tell you, and here's a little bit of advice. Okay, so as far as as you go along in the NCAA tourney, here's what we found out after 15 years of the March Madness Brotherhood, that in the beginning, of course, there's more games, and so there's going to be more teams that cover the points. Typically, I mean, there's been plenty of years where the covering the points were anywhere between 60 to 80% of the games, and that's kind of trended. This last time this year was different. The first 7 games, there was either 5 or 6 of the first 7 games that the laying the points was the way to go. And so, as you can imagine, our room was like a bunch of WTFs and all kinds of stuff. So we had to kind of scramble, to get out and recover, which we did at the end of the day, and subsequently over the weekend things got better. But once you get past the Sweet 16 round and the Elite 8, then you will almost always see that most of the teams that are here are like top 4 teams.
Exactly.
And so that's something that last week, proved to be true. Now we have one exception with North Carolina at number 8.
But they're still top 10, you could even made an argument for them to be seated higher at the beginning of the tournament based on the way they were playing.
Yeah, absolutely. There were certainly factors that led into that. And, you can argue that that's why they are where they are, because as a lower seed, all you had to do is, hit 1, maximum 2 significant victories over a lower seed. And then boom, you have an easier path.
Yeah.
But yeah, Villanova and Kansas, this first one, what I basically did here is we're on the opposite sides of the fence, as far as Villanova. The reason that I went ahead and laid the points with Kansas is because I also thought that Kansas would have been one of the teams before the tournament started that would have been derailed. Not they'd make it to the Sweet 16, but somewhere in between. They would not get to the Final Four. Okay. So here they are. Now, something happened at the end of the Villanova game that to me was key and what probably led to me taking Kansas, and that's the injury to that guard.
Interesting. Okay.
So that, is really the antithesis of why I'm picking Kansas here. Not just that, but they've been here before. They've got a great, strong coach, and they're playing well. The bottom line is they're playing well. If you're playing well enough to get here, and Villanova has done the standard Jay Wright, solid, execution of offense and defense, and they certainly could. If Kansas plays bad, that's the kind of team that will hand you your lunch. But again, my point is that with the injury of that key guard, I think that it's going to be Kansas's night.
So those who are following along, you've got Kansas -4 by the hook. Of course, that game is Saturday at 3:09 Pacific time. But it is interesting, and obviously when I was putting everything together, that injury hadn't occurred yet. But, you look back at ESPN's matchup predictor, and it's almost a coin flip. It's 50.8 versus 49.2. So,
right.
You're giving Kansas 4 points. Yeah. So it's absolutely doable.
That's a valid play. In a toss-up game, typically, I take the points. Yeah. Typically. And I just think that somewhere along the line that they're going to have scouted and they're going to, I think that injury is going to come into play at the end of the game. Because in a 50-50 game, then it just comes down to, okay, so in that 50-50 scenario, which all bets really are, that's the statistic, because no matter what that number is, there's a 50% chance it's going to happen this way and a 50% chance it's going to happen that way.
Right.
So we're talking about point spreads here. So if Kansas is on the right side of the coin, then 4 points teased down to 3.5. That's kind of like your standard, hey, Kansas is right. They made that last basket or they're ahead or whatever, right, and they get into a fouling game, and then you get these free throws that are just contributory. Yeah.
Well, not only that, but unlike the typical season where they're playing games constantly, they've had time to prepare. So, they're going to game plan based around this injury. So I'd say that is a solid bet. The next matchup in the Final Four is North Carolina. You've got them +4 against Duke. That game also Saturday at 5:49 p.m. Pacific time. By the hook on that. It's interesting because Duke is obviously favored to win this, but the way the betting is set up and the way you've got it is North Carolina just has to get within 4. They don't have to win necessarily. They just have to cover that spread.
Yeah, this bet admittedly is counterintuitive. Because, as I mentioned, prior to the tournament starting, Duke's one of the teams that I was rooting for because it's Krzyzewski's last year. There was a couple of games ago he was going for his 100th victory, was that last game? Was it last game? I think it was.
It may have been. Yeah.
So Texas Tech. So he got past that milestone, and now it's basically win one. Let's win one for the Gipper. There's an old reference right there.
Oh yeah.
So counterintuitive because I'm rooting for Duke, but again, this is a point spread here, and I think it's going to be a close game. And the same type of thing, I would not be surprised if North Carolina beats these guys. The last time they were on the floor was in Coach K's last game at home in front of the home fans, and they got beat by 25 points to North Carolina.
Right. Yeah.
And so these guys, North Carolina, they, if I remember correctly, they are like 8-2, 8-1, something like that against the spread in their last 10 or so games. And they're just on a roll, whereas Duke is like 3-5 against the spread in their last 8 games. And so as all of those factors are, even though I don't like it, it's like from a betting angle, I'm going to have to take the points.
Now, in a case like this where you're kind of betting against the common belief, whereas, normally it would be Duke -4, correct?
That's a good number.
If North Carolina +4 wins, is it a larger payout than if you bet Duke -4?
No. The only way it'll be a larger payout is if you actually go money line, which is who's going to win the game, and then North Carolina prevailed.
Because they're the underdog.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, but otherwise, the point spread is just kind of like it's kind of a side bet.
Okay. It's the handicap, basically.
Where, if you go up to the window and they're just like, oh, man, that's going to be a great game. Who's favored to win? You know what I mean? Then the odds makers say, this team's going to win. And then, but there's a side bet, if you don't want to lay the juice and only get half of your money or a third of the money that you risk, you know what I mean? There's a side bet that we think, that they should win by 6 points. You know what I mean? But theirs is, of course, based on data and analysis and conditions and stuff like that. So these guys are really, really good at what they do.
Yeah.
The lines makers.
Yeah. That's their entire life.
What a great job that would be, right? To be hired as like the official lines maker.
Just watch sports all day long.
And I wondered if they do it as a committee, which would make sense. You know what I mean? That everybody has their own little job, because you don't want to have one little minion, in there saying, like today, like what are those things called that come out and predict there's going to be winter?
The groundhog.
Groundhog, yeah.
That's how I make my sports bets.
I don't know where I got that from.
Right.
That was some random stuff there.
And then finally, NCAA basketball. Obviously, the winner of these 2 games go on to the national championship game. You put a little tease in here that you think it's going to be Duke versus Kansas. And if it is that case, that Duke would be favored in the point spread.
Well, here's the way that I'm doing this. Okay. So if Duke wins the game, it doesn't matter. I mean, the point spread, again, as we just discussed, is a side thing, but if Duke does win the game, then I think they're going to win the national championship.
Okay.
Because they'll be now there to get the ring for Coach K.
Right.
That'll be super, super powerful.
Right.
Super
especially
energetic.
In college sports, emotion goes a long way to those wins.
And then again, it's to the point that if it's against a team like Kansas or Villanova, they've got their own challenges. I didn't think Kansas would be here, so they got here. And Villanova with the injury. Now that being said, if North Carolina wins, okay, I just think that then at that point, whoever wins with Kansas or Villanova is going to prevail.
That makes a whole lot
of
sense.
So that's the way I'm just telling people that's the way that I'm going to predict next week based on what happens.
All right. And speaking of next week, that national championship game is next Monday, the 4th. Time hasn't been announced yet, but it'll be all over TBS, ESPN, so you can't miss it.
That's right.
Well, let's shift gears from college basketball to professional basketball with the NBA. First game is tonight at 4 o'clock. The 76ers against Detroit. You've got the 76ers at -9.5. That's a big point spread, but it's the 76ers. I mean, is Embiid even stoppable at this point?
Well, and that's the thing, here's kind of like the way that I bet on the NBA at this point is now, I'm acclimating, because again, tension focus on the NFL, and then it kind of moves to college basketball and March Madness because they're right there, with each other. You have about a month or so, 5 weeks or something like that right at the end. And then you kind of, the NBA, they're still like in the middle of their season, got the, all-star game, and stuff like that, So that's kind of on the back burner. So now after March Madness, we're right there at the culmination of that. So I'm acclimating, of course, with the standings. And from a betting standpoint, it's kind of like, who needs it more and where are they at? Mm-hmm. And then I also factor in the travel, and things like that we'll talk about. So in this particular one, of course, you got Philly in the third slot in the playoffs. They don't have to worry about a play-in or anything like that. And Detroit is like eliminated.
Exactly.
So that basically is it, is that the 76ers are on the road, but they're playing against a depleted team that really is just like wanting to pack their suitcase, get the season over with. And these guys are still, again, at Philly, as I look at them, they're literally a game behind the Bucks, for the number 2 slot.
Right. So they've got incentive to play well.
That's the whole
against
thing.
A team who could care less.
Yeah, basically. That's the whole thing. And of course, the roster is vastly superior.
Exactly.
So, and it's not a bad thing. 9.5 points. So you're basically saying, hey, will they win in double digits? So
it's entirely possible.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next matchup again tonight at 4:30. You've got the Bucks versus the Nets. Nets -2. This one for me is sort of a toss-up. There are 2 very good teams. You've got Giannis on one side of the coin with the Bucks. Obviously, they're going to be playing to try and keep that number 2 spot away from the 76ers. And then on the other side, you've got the Nets who, they've reconfigured a little bit, but, Drew Holiday is, again, looking good. I don't know where they stand in the potential playoff picture, but you're giving them 2 points to play with.
Yeah. And again, on this one, I actually didn't put it in here, but we should buy the hook on this one. So basically anytime in basketball, if there's a whole number, WHOLE number, you want a decision maker, so sometimes you'll buy up a half a point, sometimes you'll buy down, but just go ahead and do it, so that way you're not wasting your money. I mean, not wasting your time, I should say, because then you get your money back. So buy the hook on that. And basically same type of thing, all things being equal. These not the record, of course, but if you followed, the Nets had to go through the injury with Garnett. They've been without Kyrie, for a long time. The dream was to have those 3 together, but they had to ship off Harden.
Right.
And now there's some easements with the COVID thing, and Kyrie's going to be on the floor more, in the city of New York and on the road and things like that. And basically Kevin's come back, and from this injury, he's just like, holy, we can cuss.
Oh yeah,
we can cuss.
Holy shit.
I was like, sometimes I have to remember which show I'm on. So he comes back, and these guys are just playing lights out. So 7-3, 7-3. And you can see from the line spread standpoint, the Nets are at home, it's -2. So the odds makers are saying, we can't quite figure it out. And so I think, again, the Nets standing here in the 8th spot, they're already in the play-in, and they are not, I don't think, close enough. So we have 6 games left, and they're 4 games out of being out of the required play-in. So in the 6th spot right here with Toronto, they're 4 games away from them.
Okay.
So with 6 games to play. So it's not likely that they'll be able to get to that, but they have motivation, and of course Milwaukee has a motivation too. They got the big guy. But I just think that, I think that these guys, the Nets, they should be wanting to get their stuff in order prior to the playoffs. And no matter what the situation is, they want to be playing. They got some catching up to do. And I think that, again, it's in some ways, I think that it's better, for these guys to have like 2 alpha males.
Oh, absolutely.
Instead of 3.
It makes them better.
Instead of 3.
Yeah, 3's a crowd. For the Nets, the playoff picture is possible, not probable, but they're going to do everything they can to get there. Let's move on to the next matchup again this evening at 5 p.m. I had to double check to make sure that I was reading this correctly.
Right.
You've got the LA Clippers against the Chicago Bulls. Bulls -2.5. Clippers are my basketball team. I've been following them for years, since I was in Southern California. But
I'm sorry.
I kind of gave up on them mid-season because they weren't performing so well. And then Chicago mid-season was doing exceptionally well. All of a sudden now I'm looking at the matchup predictor here on ESPN.com, and they've got the Clippers as a 52.6% favorite to win over the Bulls. Are there injuries? What plays into this that, the spread is so low between two teams that as of 3-4 weeks ago were so vastly different?
Yeah. I think on this road trip, Clippers are in a tough spot. They're obviously going to be in the playoffs and kind of depends
just
the
barely.
way the wind blows. Yeah. And, but the Bulls haven't been playing well, but they're going to be in the playoffs for sure. And I think that this angle right here basically is they should be motivated with this little run that's coming up, this homestand. I think they have 5 games in a row at home or something like that. So they have a little homestand and they want to start it off on the right foot.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So again, getting down to the motivation, the Clippers may be a little bit preoccupied with the Bucks that are going to be coming up the following day.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's we'll talk about that in a minute. But the Bulls, just laying 2.5 points. You're talking about 3 points to be able to cover the spread. I think it'll happen.
All right, fair enough. Speaking of which, you just mentioned our next matchup, which is on Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Clippers headed to the Bucks. Now, obviously, the spread hasn't been released yet, but you've got the Bucks favored to win. In my mind, it just makes sense. I mean, the Bucks have been playing really well. Clippers are still on the road. They're going to be tired after playing the Bulls. It just makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, again, it gets one of those angles. You look, that's exactly what I did. And so, look, which teams am I going to take? And then one of the first things I did is I looked to see in the next few days which teams are going to be playing back to back. And there was another one that was between the Pistons and the Thunder, and they both are terrible. so that didn't make any sense, to have action on that, because that's totally there's no angle, there's no kind of data to kind of be inspired by, so to speak. And so Clippers playing back to back. They got to play the Bulls, and then if my bet is true on the Bulls, they're going to have coming off a loss, and then they have to face Giannis.
Right.
Or if they did beat the Bulls, that it's going to be from an effort standpoint. They had to exert effort, and then they have to play Giannis.
Exactly. Either way, they're playing Giannis, and it's
not good for them. It's not a good spot. That's what I was saying earlier.
Well, speaking of not looking good, our final matchup is also a Saturday game at 7:30. You've got the pitiful Pelicans against the loser Lakers. Both teams are just god awful this season. ESPN has the Pelicans as the favorite to win. For me, it's sort of a toss-up. You've got the Pelicans favored to cover the spread. Any insight into that game?
Yeah, again, both of these loser Lakers, I wore this hat for a reason, because I knew that I was picking against the Lakers, and I just always like to show that I'm not a homer. You know what I mean? I root for my team, but when it comes to things like this, everybody knows the plight of the Lakers. They are just playing super, super bad. And the Pelicans, of course, I wouldn't say they're formidable, but they could beat the Lakers. They're both sitting at number 9 and number 10 right now in the playoff scenario. So they're currently in the play-in round. But, so again, bottom line, I don't know what the point spread's going to be, but I'm imagining the Lakers are going to be the favorite and the Pelicans are going to be getting points. And this is a toss-up game to me. Either team could win.
Yeah.
LeBron or no.
I agree. Yeah.
And so give me the points, and but don't bet the rent on it. You know what I mean? It's just it's like one of those. Really what we're doing here is out of the ones that are on the plate, between a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I go through all of those scenarios, and these are the ones that pretty much gravitated based on the analysis that I go through.
And it's funny because that's going to be a primetime game on Saturday. Obviously, most people are going to be watching the Final Four matchup. Actually, Final Four Sunday. Never mind. No, this is Friday.
Monday. Monday will be the final.
I keep thinking today's Friday. That's very weird. Yeah.
It's coming.
Yeah. So in any case, it'll be interesting, but I wouldn't put stock in either of these two teams overall. just go with the points. All right. And then real quick, before we get to our sports betting for dummies, take a look at how we're doing overall in the hockey standings. Wanted to talk about a couple things that have interested us individually, maybe something to look at from the sports betting. I know you're a fan of the Masters, and if know, it's coming up, if somebody was to go sports betting in the Masters, what sort of things should they keep in mind? What sort of things should they look at stat-wise to make an educated bet?
Yeah, it is. It's a different type of fun. The Masters and other major tournaments. I don't know if they do it every week, and I doubt if they do it every week as far as sheets, that they have in the sports book and stuff like that. But for the Masters and the other majors, I'm sure that they do. You can get some pre-tournament type of wagers based on the players and stuff. And so it could, again, everything's based on fun. And if you say have a favorite player, it's like no different than betting on a horse. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So before the Masters started, just like, hey, I like player, this one or whatever, Dustin, I'm drawing a blank.
You're asking the wrong guy.
Yeah,
I watch golf to take a nap on Sundays. That's the only time I turn golf on.
But man, we could have talked. Like Phil's been in some trouble. I guess they started this little like side tour or something like that competed with the PGA tour. Oh, no. You know what I mean? And so I don't know the full story on that, but golf again is something that I love. I used to be involved with it, for many years in a couple different forums. And so, but the Masters is the one tournament where I pay attention that week, is because there's nothing like Augusta. It's on my bucket list. Mm-hmm. True story. I was actually invited to play there one year with a member, and I couldn't work it into the schedule, which is like, I still can't believe that I'm saying that.
Opportunity.
Yeah. This is just crazy to say. And so, but it's on the bucket list. I would like to get, on that golf course while I'm still able to walk around a golf course, so to speak. So it's definitely a special one. There's been times in my golf world where I've been able to be fortunate to associate with, pros. There's been times at one of the U.S. Opens that I was as close to Jack Nicklaus as, you to me while he's executing a shot. It just happened to be standing right where one of his balls went. I've been outside the ropes, inside the ropes. So I can't play the game like I used to, which is very frustrating, but I appreciate the skill that these guys bring to the table. So now that being said, back to the betting side. So you can do that before the game, or what I like to do, again, the in-play is magnificent, because the in-play still happens during the Masters and other tournaments, to where based on the way the leaderboard goes, then the odds and payouts for a person. You can get some great value. There could be, say, a golfer that is like 2-1 or 1-2, I should say, to win the Masters, which I don't think anybody's like that. I could actually,
maybe not this season. Yeah.
We'll get it more into it as far as like, because I think, is it this weekend or maybe the following weekend?
I don't know.
Let
me know, because I could use a really good nap on a Sunday. So.
But I would go the in play, like I said, just basically different player. There's a lot of different ways as far as like the in play with the Masters that I go. But what's really nice to do is to be able to get information on the players, while the tournament's going on, because there's always new ones and there's, established ones and stuff like that. And there's little bits of information. The commentators are pretty good. You get Jim Nantz, every year, what I mean? So he kind of calms you down a little bit, and they got some comedians on there. But when you think about that from an entertainment standpoint too, you're not listening to the same guy. Mm-hmm. They'll pop from hole to hole, and you have different commentators, what I mean, on different holes, and that are reporting on things. So, all in all, if you have a big screen TV, that has really good definition to it, there's no golf course like Augusta National as far as beauty. Yeah. And so that's another thing. Yeah, it's a good way for some people to just relax, have a couple of mimosas, kind of check out, just the nuances of the game, and then you take your little nap.
Fair enough. I will give golf this as well. If you've ever been to a Top Golf, where they've got basically it's like an arcade game.
That's so much fun.
Multiple levels. You know, you order drinks.
Yeah.
That's the type of golf that I like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if you're really on the time management thing, you say I can't watch golf for 4 days in a row. The most important part of any Masters is the final 9 holes on Sunday. So, you know, typically 2:00 on Sunday.
Okay.
You know, and that'll lead right into your nap at 4:00.
Interesting. All right. Do they offer in play?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
Makes a whole lot of sense.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Now, while golf may be your thing, the other thing that's big for me, I grew up in a car family, an automotive family, spent loads of time around IndyCar racing and Formula One. Huge Formula One fan, of course. Now it is making a bigger way into the U.S., you know, trying to get down to Austin for the United States Grand Prix in October this year.
Yeah.
Next year, they have a second race in Las Vegas. I'm definitely going to be there. But they just kicked off their season, had their second race this last weekend. And, you know, the cars, the setups, even the teams are vastly different than what they were last season.
You're talking Formula One.
Talking Formula One. You've got 20 drivers, 10 teams, and so much fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're talking about. I mean, those guys are the fast, sleek things. Mario Andretti, I remember that name.
Yep.
And AJ Foyt, right? You know, type of drivers.
They're more associated with IndyCar, but
what's the difference? Formula One and Indy, I thought they're
both open wheel. Formula One is international. IndyCar is United States.
Oh, okay, okay, that's good.
But Mario Andretti is actually a part owner of the United States Haas team in Formula One, so there are ties to it.
Yeah.
I'm wearing my Lewis Hamilton hat, who's, you know, a 7-time world champion. But when it comes to the sports betting aspect, which I've been researching more and more, essentially with every race, there are 3 races going on at the same time. You've got the top of the pack, which are teams like Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari. Okay. So you'll want to bet based on those. You have your middle of the pack, which is typically teams like McLaren, you know, Alpine, you know, Toro Rosso, Alfa Romeo to some degree. And then you've got the bottom of the pack where it's, you've got Williams, who was a huge name in racing for years, Haas, unfortunately. And this season, McLaren is unfortunately down there as well. But those are the things you want to look at. So, you know, where people kind of end up based on the constructor side, and then look at individual racers. Now, Mercedes, who has been dominant for almost a decade now, they're really struggling this season. So while you've got Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, who are on the team who on the sports betting lines may be favored, you may want to keep an eye on those Ferrari drivers who right now are at the top of the standings, which, you know, they haven't been competitive at all the last 2 seasons. So a couple things to consider. I'm getting more and more into the sports betting aspect of it myself. And so, you know, the next Grand Prix is 2 Saturdays from now in Australia. So when we do this next week, I'll have a little more information, provide you guys that info when we get there.
I'm interested for sure.
Yeah, so much fun. All right, and now let's get into our sports betting for dummies. See how we're doing on the hockey side, a sport that neither of us is intimately familiar with, but we're getting more and more knowledge. I'm looking right now. We're not doing terribly, but we're not doing well. As of now, you're -3 points. I'm -2. Of course, I always go with the bigger puck line bets, which are worth 2 points. You go with the money line, which are worth 1. But, you know, it's been fun figuring this out.
Yeah, I think, like, what do we got here? Like, since we started doing this with the, I think we're like 5 weeks or something like that. Could find out for sure. But I think I basically am 1-4. So out of every week, there was only one time that I won, and I'm just trying to pick a winner.
Right.
and then you are going the puck line, you know, which is a different type of bet. Basically, one team, you know, is chosen
to the spread.
Yeah.
And
it's the same thing in baseball. They have a run line. So it's a puck line like a run line. And we figured out a little point system, you know, much like hockey uses, you know, based on a win, loss, or tie. So we're having fun. And at this point, you are in the lead because we're going with integers, negative integers. And like in this case, we're in the negative. So your -2 is ahead of my -3. Let's just say I'm doing worse than you. and so it's a lot. It's fun concept though, because here's what's happening this week. I've picked, I have this wrong.
I was going to say,
there we go. Okay, I'm fixing it right now. Okay, so I'm picking San Jose Sharks, and actually they're at home too, I think, right?
No, Colorado's at home.
Okay, so I'm picking the San Jose Sharks plus 240 to beat the Colorado Avalanche. So they're the underdog, and then you have the Dallas Stars who are visiting the Anaheim Ducks.
Correct.
Okay, and man, that's a good one too, because I think the Ducks are going to win, and they're getting 1.5 points. So I like that. So with the puck line, what we've established is that if you, a lot of times, or some of the times, you've picked the -1.5. You know what I mean? -1.5, which is normally like a plus payoff.
Right.
And so we established that if you did that and it hit, that you would get plus 2 points. And in this case, the one that you chose is a regular, it's kind of a regular bet, like -165. And so on that one, you would receive 1 point.
Right.
And then the same thing on my side. If mine was like a minus anything between a pick'em to a minus, say, 199, then that's worth 1 point. Now, in this case, the San Jose Sharks are 2-1 underdog. So if I get that, I get 2 points.
Right. You get paid out really well. Seeing a plus 240 in hockey is astronomical.
Yeah. It's like, it's a major underdog.
Yeah.
But the same thing in your case on the puck line. It's hard enough to pick, as I'm showing, as I'm reflecting in my record so far, it's hard enough to pick who's going to win a professional contest. Professional major sports, doesn't matter, basketball, hockey, on any given day, football, baseball, any team can win. And history, of course, has proven that. These guys are so close in talent, it's amazing. And so when you say this team's not only going to win, so you've identified the winner, but they're going to win by 2 pucks or more, then it's kind of like, okay, so now you see why you get the positive money. And so that's why we got this little system here to have fun with, and it makes sense to me. We can always tweak it though.
I like it. And it's, one of those things that, I like diving into the stats of things here on the hockey side, because I don't have that gut feeling, the knowledge of years of watching like football, for instance. So, with this one, I went with the Ducks plus 1.5, because if you look at their last 10 matchups head to head against each other, they've been within 0.2 points of each other.
Over time?
Over the last 10 matchups between these two. Now, the other thing is both teams just played each other 2 days ago, and Dallas beat Anaheim 3-2. So just the 1 point covered. So 1.5 points, it's reasonable to think that they can stay within that.
Yeah. And of course, even a lot of times what you'll see is on these plus 1.5s, then the lay is like in the minus 200s. So you're only getting half of what you risk. And so this one's a minus 165, which is good value. And at the same time, they're saying the odds are, this will happen. Because like I said, you get plus 1.5. And I think that the Ducks are going to actually have a good chance of upsetting these guys. It's the Mighty Ducks.
Exactly. Knuckle puck time. All right. With that being said, that does it for another episode. It was great to be back. Yeah, we'll get back into the groove of being here each and every Thursday, give you guys some more information. Yeah. Hopefully you'll follow along, share, and, chime in from time to time. If, we won you some money, we'd like to know. Yeah, this has been fun. And we're working on some really good things outside of this that we're not at liberty to discuss, but but very exciting. Very exciting. We'll let you know when we get there. A little tease. All right. With that being said, that's another week's show in the books. We will see you all next week. See you.